Glacier Crest Lodge, $1,400 a night, 3-night minimum. Lakefront luxury cabin with private dock, booked solid through April. That was the listing my wife handed me on her phone the afternoon I came home from a 6-week excavation contract in eastern Montana. The luxury cabin was 2 stories of timber and stone that the Glacier Crest HOA had built on my pasture while I was gone. 2,400 square feet, stone chimney, wraparound deck, private dock running into Whitefish Creek Arm. No permit, no survey, no septic license, no certificate of occupancy. Allie Crawford, the HOA president, had personally signed off on her husband's construction company building a vacation rental on land that had belonged to my family since 1968. She had been collecting $1,400 a night for 5 months. She had not asked. She did not know I owned my own excavators. She did not know what a Class A Montana demolition certification was. Tell me, what would you do? The Aldridge Ranch sits on 320 acres of glacial meadow, lodgepole stand, and creek bottom at the southern foot of Big Mountain, 8 miles north of Whitefish, Montana. My grandfather, Wendell Aldridge, homesteaded the original quarter section in 1916. My father, Cyrus, added the rest in 3 pieces between 1948 and 1971. I bought my brother and sister out of the place in 2002, with money I'd saved running a D9 Cat for 15 years on pipeline jobs from Williston to Sydney. I came home, married a hospital nurse from Kalispell named Linnea, raised 1 son named Cole, and built up Aldridge Excavation into a 6-man crew that does foundations, ponds, and septic work from Eureka down to Big Fork. My name is Holt Aldridge. I am 61. I have a bad back from 1989, a Class A operator's license that's been current since I was 19, and a Montana State demolition certification I've held since 2008. The cabin showed up while I was gone. I'd taken a 6-week excavation contract on the Bakken side of the state in mid-September. A private equity outfit needed access roads cut on a new mineral lease east of Sydney. I left Cole and my foreman Briggs running the local jobs. My granddaughter June, who was 4, drew me a stick figure picture of our barn that I kept taped above my cot. I came home November 1st under a low gray sky, with snow on the high ground. I drove up the county road past the new gate at Glacier Crest at Whitefish Lake, the gated subdivision that had broken ground 2 years earlier on the 80-acre tract bordering our western boundary. 42 log-trim mansions around a private cove, a clubhouse with a stone fireplace big enough to roast an elk in, and a sign at the gate that said, "Residents and guests only," in iron letters. Then I rounded the bend toward our gate, and I stopped the truck in the middle of the road. There was a cabin on my pasture. A 2-story, 2,400 square foot timber lodge with a stone chimney, a wraparound deck, a wood shingle roof, a private dock running out into the creek arm, and a freshly graded gravel drive looping in from the Glacier Crest side of the boundary. It had not been there 6 weeks earlier. Nobody had called me. Nobody had asked. I sat with both hands on the wheel and counted to 20. The way my father had taught me to do when something needed thinking through instead of yelling at. Then I drove the rest of the way to the house. Linnea was in the kitchen with our blue heeler, Pete. She had her work scrubs on and a cup of coffee in one hand. She looked up, saw my face, set the coffee down carefully. "You saw it. How long?" 3 weeks after you left, a crew working 12-hour days. I called you twice, but you were down in a hole on a propane install, and I figured a few days wouldn't hurt. Then it kept going. I called the county. They told me it was a Glacier Crest internal project on Glacier Crest property. I called Sutton Briscoe last week. He's been waiting for you to get home. I went to the kitchen window. From there I could see the cabin's roofline through the lodgepole, lit gold against the gray sky. Smoke came out of the chimney. Somebody was inside it. "Linnea, quiet. Who's inside?" She handed me her phone, already open to a vacation rental listing. Glacier Crest Lodge, $1,400 a night, 3-night minimum, booked solid through April. I stood at the window a long time. Pete leaned against my leg and breathed slow. When I finally turned around, Linnea was watching me with the patient eyes of a nurse who had seen me come home from worse jobs. "What now, Holt?" "Now," I said, "I go get the binder." The binder lived in the desk drawer of the office I'd built off the side of the equipment shop. It held the original deeds, the hand-drawn 1962 survey my father commissioned the year my brother was born, the property tax records since 1948, and a copy of every building permit I'd ever pulled in 3 counties for the last 23 years. I have always been a man who keeps paper. I pulled the binder, drove the half-mile back down to the cabin, parked the truck on the county road, and walked up the gravel drive to the front porch. A woman in her 30s opened on the second knock. She looked at me with mild curiosity. "Are you the maintenance guy?" "No, ma'am. I'm the property owner. Could you ask your party to step outside for a few minutes? I need to take some photographs." She did. There were 5 of them, 2 couples and a teenager. They stood on the wraparound deck in Patagonia pants, looking confused. I took 37 photographs of the structure from 4 sides, including the unpermitted septic vent on the north slope and 3 meter boxes hooked into Glacier Crest's electric loop without a county permit. I did not raise my voice. I did not enter the cabin. When I finished, I thanked the guests, told them they had not done anything wrong, and suggested they call Glacier Crest management. I drove home and called Sutton Briscoe. Sutton was a real estate attorney out of Whitefish, who had handled 3 previous boundary disputes for me over the years. Small stuff, pole barn corners, fence line creep. He was 58, built like a fence post, the kind of lawyer who wore Wranglers in court because he'd been thrown out of a bar in Eureka in 1981 for showing up in slacks. He answered on the second ring. "Holt, welcome home. Linnea told me what's there. How bad?" 2-story timber lodge, 2,400 square feet, stone chimney, dock, septic, electrical hookup. Built in 5 weeks, booked on a vacation rental site at $1,400 a night for the past 4 months. The line went very quiet. "Holt, read me the deed." I read him the original 1962 meets and bounds description my father had recorded with the Flathead County Clerk and Recorder's Office. South of the Whitefish Creek arm to the high water mark. East to the iron pin set in the basalt outcropping. North along the section line. I read for a full minute. Sutton listened without interruption. When I finished, he said, "Stay there. Don't talk to anyone from Glacier Crest. Don't post anything online. Don't go back to the cabin. I'm going to do 3 things this afternoon. I'm going to pull the recorded plat that Glacier Crest claims puts the cabin on their parcel. I'm going to pull every building permit, septic permit, and short-term rental license that has ever been issued for that structure. And I am going to call the county clerk to verify the chain of title on the disputed acreage. By tomorrow morning, I'll know exactly what we have." "What do you think we have?" He was quiet for a moment. "Holt, if those permits don't exist, and I am 90% sure they don't, we have a textbook case of trespass to title and unauthorized improvement under Montana common law, which is a category of property dispute that allows a court to order the structure removed at the trespasser's expense, with no compensation to them for the value of the improvement." "Removed how?" "Demolished, Holt. Demolished and hauled away." I took a breath through my nose. The cabin's chimney smoke was still visible through the kitchen window, 3/4 of a mile away across the pasture. "Sutton." "Yes." "Who would do the demolishing?" He laughed, just once, soft. "Well, Holt, I'd say the licensed Class A demolition contractor, who happens to own the land and lives 1,000 yards away, is probably going to want to bid on that work." I hung up. I went out to the equipment shop and stood looking at the 2 D6 cats, the John Deere excavator, and the demolition shears Cole had welded onto the smaller bucket last spring. I went back inside and started a new binder. The label said, Glacier Crest. Sutton called the next morning at 6:58, which was 3 minutes after his office was technically open, and exactly 8 minutes after my second cup of coffee. "Holt, the plat exists. It was filed by Glacier Crest Development LLC in March of 2020. It was signed off as reviewed for compliance by the Flathead County Deputy Surveyor, a woman named Karis Vorland, who based her review entirely on a desk audit of Glacier Crest's submitted survey. There is no record of independent field verification. There is no record of notice to adjacent landowners. There is no recorded surveyor's affidavit in the file. The whole thing is a paperwork fiction, signed by a county employee who never set foot on the line. Can they do that? No, they can't. It violates Montana Code Annotated 76-3 something, the Subdivision and Platting Act. But they did, and the plat has been on file for 2.5 years. What about the building permits? There are no building permits, Holt. Not for the cabin, not for the dock, not for the septic, not for the electrical. There is no certificate of occupancy. There is no short-term rental license issued by the county. The Glacier Crest HOA has been advertising and renting that lodge as a vacation rental since June 12th, without a single document on file with any government office in the state of Montana. The numbers started running themselves in my head. June through November, 5 months, most weekends booked, at $1,400 a night. Sutton, what's the revenue exposure? Round numbers? Conservatively $140,000 in cleared bookings. They have not, by the way, paid a single dollar in Montana lodging tax on any of it. That is its own felony. I took the binder over to the kitchen table. Linnea had made eggs. She put a plate down in front of me without speaking. Pete sat at my feet and waited for the toast crust I always slipped him. "There's one more thing," Sutton said. "I had a contact at the Department of Environmental Quality run the septic system overnight. The drain field for the cabin is graded toward Whitefish Creek Arm. The arm flows into Whitefish Lake, which flows into the Whitefish River, which is part of the Flathead drainage. That's federal waters under the Clean Water Act. An unpermitted septic discharging into protected water is not a county problem, Holt. That is an EPA problem. That carries personal criminal liability for the people who installed it and the HOA officers who authorized it." I set my fork down. Who installed it? Per the photos you sent me, the septic vent stack is a Crawford construction stack. Same color, same logo, same model number Trent Crawford has used on every Glacier Crest install for the past 4 years. Trent Crawford, Allie Crawford's husband. Developer of Glacier Crest at Whitefish Lake. Sponsor of Little League uniforms with his name on the back of every 6-year-old shortstop in the valley. Sutton, I need you to file as much as we can file by the end of business today. Already drafting. Quiet title in district court. Trespass to land. Ejectment. Unjust enrichment for the lodge revenue. Slander of title. Treble damages under Montana wrongful occupation statute. And we will be filing an emergency motion to enjoin further rental bookings, pending resolution, plus separate complaints with the county building department, the state DEQ, the Department of Revenue for the unpaid lodging tax, the Real Estate Commission against Trent's broker license, and a referral letter to the U.S. Attorney's Office in Missoula for the Clean Water Act violation. How long? Quiet title can take 6 to 9 months in district court. The injunction we can get inside of 3 weeks if I push. The ejectment with a writ of removal. That's the demolition order. We can have inside of 90 days if the boundary is as clean as I think it is. 90 days. Holt, the plat is fake. The deed is yours. The construction is unpermitted. The rental is unlicensed. The septic is criminal. This is not a complicated case. The complicated cases are the ones where the other side has even one piece of paper. The other side has none. I looked out the window at the lodge's chimney smoke. File it, Sutton. File all of it. I poured another cup of coffee. Pete put his head on my knee. The cabin was going to come down. I could already see, in the back of my mind, the order of the cuts. Allie Crawford came up the gravel drive in her white Tahoe at 2:15 the following Tuesday afternoon. I watched her come from the equipment shop, where I was running a torque check on the excavator's hydraulic lines. She parked the Tahoe sideways in front of the shop, stepped out in white moon boots and a cream cashmere coat, and crossed the gravel with the high-stepping caution of a woman who had not, in the previous decade, walked on a working surface. "Mr. Aldridge." "Mrs. Crawford. I was hoping we could have a private conversation. My shop is private." She glanced at the open bay door, the grease-stained floor, the diesel cans. She did not come inside. She stayed in the gravel, 20 feet from the door, and pulled out a leather portfolio. "Mr. Aldridge, there's been an unfortunate misunderstanding regarding a small parcel along our shared boundary. Glacier Crest leadership has discussed this internally, and we'd like to propose a clean resolution that benefits both communities." Both communities. Yes, we've prepared an offer of $25,000 in exchange for a quitclaim deed clarifying the disputed acreage as Glacier Crest Common Area. The amount reflects fair market value for the 4 acres in question, plus a goodwill premium, plus reimbursement for any inconvenience the construction may have caused you while you were traveling. I wiped my hands on the shop rag I always carry. I walked to the doorway. I leaned on the doorframe. Mrs. Crawford, the 4 acres in question is Aldridge Ranch land. It has been Aldridge Ranch land since my father bought it from the Hostetler estate in 1968. The original survey is recorded with the Flathead County Clerk under Book 142, page 311. The structure your husband's company built sits on that parcel without a permit, without a survey, without a septic license, without an occupancy certificate, and without my knowledge or consent. Mr. Aldridge. I'm not done. The structure has also been operating as an unlicensed short-term rental in violation of Montana state lodging tax law and county business code. The septic system installed by Crawford Construction discharges into Whitefish Creek Arm in violation of the Clean Water Act. The plat your HOA has been relying on was filed without proper field verification by the deputy county surveyor and is, in legal terms, void on its face. She had stopped breathing through her nose somewhere around the word permit. My attorney filed 7 different complaints against your HOA, your husband's construction company, and the Glacier Crest Board personally last Friday afternoon. The county building department has issued a stop work order on the structure. The DEQ has opened a septic investigation. The Department of Revenue is auditing the lodge bookings for back taxes and penalties. Your husband's broker license is under review by the state. And your offer of $25,000 to quitclaim my own land is, in my respectful opinion, the 8th stupidest thing anyone has ever said in my driveway. She lifted her chin. The portfolio shook a little in her hand. We can pursue this through litigation, Mr. Aldridge, but I would caution you that Glacier Crest has substantial legal resources. Then bring them. Now please remove your vehicle from my equipment yard before my foreman backs the dump truck out and we have a different kind of misunderstanding. She turned, walked back to the Tahoe in those moon boots, and drove off too fast on the gravel. By the time I got back inside the house, Sutton was on the phone. Holt, I just got a call from the Glacier Crest HOA's attorney, a man named Ramsey Yarborough out of Kalispell. He's offering $100,000 to settle the boundary and walk away from the cabin in place. He says they'll pay the lodging tax themselves and indemnify you against the EPA. He sounds nervous. Tell him no. Holt. Tell him no, Sutton. The cabin comes down. I want the writ of removal. I want the demolition order in my hand. I want it on a date certain. And then I want every camera in Flathead County aimed at my equipment when we tear it down. There is a reason these people built without a permit, and the reason is they thought nobody would do anything about it. The next person they try this on needs to look up and see what happens to people who think nobody will do anything about it. Sutton was quiet for a moment. Holt, I'll tell him no. I hung up. Linnea was at the table watching me. You all right? I'm getting there. I went out to the shop. I started the excavator and let it warm up. The diesel smoked cold in the November air, and I sat in the cab a long time, watching my breath. The deputy county surveyor was a woman named Karis Vorland. She was 41, sharp at her job, engaged to a high school history teacher named Owen Mott in Columbia Falls. She had worked in the Flathead County Surveyor's office for 11 years and had never had a complaint filed against her. She had also, beginning in 2019, been carrying on what she believed was a private personal relationship with a Whitefish real estate developer named Trent Crawford. It had started at a Chamber of Commerce mixer and continued through the Glacier Crest plat process in 2020. It had ended in late 2021 when Karis discovered Trent was simultaneously involved with at least 3 other women in the Flathead Valley, none of whom knew about each other or his marriage to Allie. Karis had not told her fiancé. She had not told her supervisor. She had quietly extracted herself and gone on with her life. She had not, however, gone back to re-examine her file on the Glacier Crest plat, because doing so would have required her to acknowledge what she already suspected, that her field review signature in March of 2020 had been a paper formality given to a man she had been sleeping with on a survey she had never personally walked. Sutton Briscoe's investigator pulled her name out of courthouse personnel records on day 3. Sutton's intern cross-referenced it against Crawford Construction's project lists and a 4-year-old Daily Interlake fundraiser photo of Karis and Trent standing very close at a silent auction table. Sutton sat on the information for 2 days. Then he made one phone call. He did not call Karis. He called the chief of the Flathead County Surveyor's Office, a man named Cordell Beach, who had been the chief for 14 years and who had a reputation for being personally unforgiving of professional misconduct in his office. Sutton told Cordell exactly what he knew. He told him about the Glacier Crest plat. He told him about the missing field verification. He told him about the Crawford-Vorland relationship. He told him he was about to subpoena every email between the two of them, dating back to 2019 in the discovery process. Cordell sat at his desk in silence for a long time. Then he called Karis Vorland into his office. She broke down inside of 6 minutes. She admitted everything: the relationship, the desk audit signature, the failure to verify, the months of avoiding looking at the file. She offered her resignation on the spot. Cordell accepted it. He also called the Montana Board of Professional Land Surveyors, the Flathead County Attorney, and the Daily Interlake's investigative reporter Jolene Trask, all in that order, and he did so before lunch. By the time Sutton called me that afternoon, the story had 3 heads of steam behind it. The plat was now on a list to be formally rescinded. Karis Vorland's surveying license was being suspended pending investigation. Trent Crawford had been put on notice that the State Real Estate Commission would be opening a parallel investigation into his licensure, and Jolene Trask had requested an interview. Sutton paused on the line. "Holt, I want to ask you something." "Ask." "Do we sit on this for the demolition, or do we let it run?" I thought about it for 30 seconds. "Let it run, Sutton. Let everybody know the cabin should never have existed. Then we tear it down." He didn't say anything for a moment. "Yes, sir." 90 days, Sutton had said. The writ of removal in 90 days, if everything broke right. We did not waste them. I started with the equipment. I had the 2D6 Cats, the John Deere 350G excavator, with the demolition grapple Cole had welded together the previous spring, and a pair of Western Star dump trucks. I drove the excavator down to Big Fork and ran it through a 40-point inspection at the Komatsu dealership. I had the hydraulic lines repressurized, the cab radio replaced, and every grease point packed by hand. When the day came, I wanted nothing on the equipment to be the reason the work paused. Cole inspected the dump trucks. Briggs ran the smaller Cat through a load test. We did not advertise what we were preparing for. We did not need to. People in the equipment business know what a man is doing when he starts pulling apart his demolition grapple in November. I pulled the permits I would need on the back end. Demolition debris haul-off permit through the county solid waste district. Burn permit for the wood debris, if salvageable timber could not be reused. Stormwater plan to keep concrete and treated wood out of the creek arm. I filed each one early, weeks before any judge had ruled, because I did not want a bureaucrat to be the reason the bulldozer sat idle. In parallel, Sutton built the case in district court. He filed the quiet title action on the Tuesday after Thanksgiving. He filed the trespass to land, the ejectment with petition for writ of removal, the slander of title, and the unjust enrichment claim on the same morning. He filed the parallel complaints with the county building department, the state DEQ, the Department of Revenue, the Real Estate Commission, and the U.S. Attorney's Office in Missoula in 3 separate envelopes, mailed certified the same day. He worked from a 38-page binder with colored tabs on every page. The original 1962 Meets and Bounds survey, the 1968 deed transferring the 4-acre parcel from the Hostetler estate to my father, every property tax assessment back to 1969, all paid by the Aldridge family in unbroken succession. Karis Vorland's sworn resignation letter, the Crawford Construction septic documentation, the EPA preliminary letter on the Clean Water Act violation, the Department of Revenue audit showing the HOA had collected $217,000 in lodge bookings without remitting $1 in lodging tax. He also had the 2 photo binders I'd assembled, the listing screenshots for every booking, the credit card processing trail, and the maintenance invoices. He had everything. While Sutton built the case, I trained the crew on the demolition sequence. We laid out a paper plan on the shop floor with chalk. The cabin was a 2-story timber lodge with a stone chimney. The chimney went first because if the chimney came down clean, the rest of the structure folded predictably. The roof came second, peeled back with the excavator's grapple. The second floor walls came third, then the deck. Then the first floor, then the foundation slab, then the dock, then the gravel drive. We rehearsed the order 3 different evenings, sketching shapes on the concrete with chalk, walking each man through which piece of equipment he would be on, which radio channel, which signal. I also ordered, at my own expense, a tarp wall to be erected along the property boundary on the morning of the demolition, 6 feet tall, bright orange. The tarp would not block the view of the cabin from the Glacier Crest side. I wanted them to watch, but it would mark the line of jurisdiction unmistakably for the news cameras. Everything inside the orange line was Aldridge land. Everything outside the orange line was not my problem. I bought a bullhorn. I had not used a bullhorn since the 80s. I tested it in the equipment yard one afternoon, and Pete the healer ran for the house with his ears pinned back. Linnea found me at the kitchen table that night, running back through the chalk diagram on a yellow legal pad. "Holt, you've planned every minute of this for the last 6 weeks." "I know." "What happens if they file something at the last second?" I looked up at her. "Then we still go. We'll have a court order. The order is the order. They can file whatever they want. The cabin still comes down." She looked at the diagram a moment, then back at me. "Pete and I will be on the porch." The Glacier Crest HOA's response to Sutton's filings was, by almost any historical measure, the most expensive panic I have ever watched a group of people purchase. Within 72 hours, Ramsey Yarborough's law firm had filed a 30-page motion to dismiss, a parallel motion to stay the building department's stop work order, an emergency motion for a protective order against me personally on grounds of anticipated property damage, and a defamation counterclaim asserting that my photographs of the cabin had interfered with HOA business interests by causing 4 future bookings to cancel. Sutton wrote a single 14-page response and let the motions die in front of Judge Halsey Burke at a status conference the following week. The judge denied them all from the bench in 9 minutes. Allie Crawford then made what would later turn out to be the most consequential decision of her year. She decided to recruit my son. Cole was 33, married to a kindergarten teacher named Hannah, raising June and a baby on the way, and had been working with me at Aldridge Excavation for 11 years. He had his own Class A operator's license, and a quiet, practical mind I trusted with anything I had ever built. Allie cornered him in the Whitefish IGA parking lot on a Tuesday evening in mid-December and offered him a $40,000 consulting contract for a boundary compliance assessment of the Aldridge Ranch property, which would require Cole to provide a review favorable to the Glacier Crest plat position. Cole said he would consider it. He drove home that night, walked into my kitchen, set his phone on the table in front of me, and said, "I recorded all 6 minutes of it, Dad. 2-party state, but she came up to me uninvited in a public parking lot. Counsel says we're fine." Sutton listened to the recording the next morning and did not laugh, which was how I knew it was serious. He played it again with the speakerphone on. Then he picked up his desk phone and called the Flathead County Attorney's office. By Thursday, the county attorney had opened a formal criminal investigation into Allison Crawford for attempted bribery of a witness in pending civil litigation under MCA 45-7-201. The state attorney general's office picked up parallel review the following Monday because the matter intersected with the open Real Estate Commission investigation against Trent. By Christmas, Allie had been personally indicted on 2 state felony counts. She did not stop. People like Allie do not stop. The day after her arraignment, she posted a 14-paragraph essay on the Glacier Crest community page, accusing me of inciting violence against neighborhood volunteers, harassing a Christian woman during a season of grief. She had recently lost a great aunt, and leveraging a personal vendetta into a coordinated campaign of legal terror. She set up a GoFundMe titled, "Defend Our HOA from Corporate Intimidation." The campaign raised $3,400 in the first day, including, the Daily Interlake later reported, $2,000 from her own husband through 3 different aliases. Trent hired a Missoula PR firm and gave a sit-down interview to the local CBS affiliate, calling me a rogue equipment contractor with anger issues. By Wednesday morning, the station's news director had quietly issued a correction, noting no anger issue allegations existed on file with any law enforcement agency in the state. The pressure kept building. A Glacier Crest resident filed an IRS complaint, suggesting I had not reported lodge bookings. I had no lodge bookings because I had no lodge. The complaint was dismissed inside of 3 weeks. What none of these moves accomplished was the only thing they were intended to accomplish, which was to stop the case from moving forward. Sutton's filing sat in Judge Halsey Burke's docket. The DEQ inspection moved forward. The Real Estate Commission investigation moved forward. The county attorney's bribery case against Alley moved forward. The U.S. Attorney's Office in Missoula opened a parallel federal review of the Clean Water Act question. And in the equipment shop, Cole and Briggs and I kept running rehearsals. The ground was frozen. The cabin was still standing. The chimney smoke had stopped going up because the bookings had been suspended by court order, and the lodge was empty. We were ready. Trent Crawford made the last move himself. He made it at 3 in the morning on a Monday in early February, when the temperature outside was 11 degrees Fahrenheit, and the equipment yard was lit only by the security floods I had installed the year before. He came on foot. He came alone. He came carrying a 5-gallon jug of diesel fuel and a wire cutter and a flashlight he kept dark. He cut the chain on the equipment yard gate. He walked across 40 yards of frozen gravel to the lowboy trailer where the John Deere 350G excavator sat strapped down. He climbed up onto the operator's deck of the excavator. He used the wire cutter to slash through both of the main hydraulic lines feeding the boom. Then he opened the diesel jug, poured it into the cab, into the engine bay through the access panel, and onto the lowboy decking around the tracks. He stood for a moment, looking at the spreading slick. He pulled a lighter from his jacket pocket. He did not know about the trail cameras. I had installed 7 of them after Allie's parking lot bribery attempt in December. On the equipment yard fence, the shop, the lowboy, the access road, and one hidden inside the cab of the excavator itself. Each was infrared, motion-activated, time-stamped, and uploaded its footage to a cloud server within 60 seconds of capture. My phone vibrated on the nightstand at 3:06. I rolled over, opened the alert, and watched 11 seconds of footage of Trent Crawford pouring diesel onto my excavator. I called the sheriff. I did not call him directly. I called dispatch, because I wanted everything on the record. The deputy on duty was a man named Pruitt I'd known for 20 years. He was at my equipment yard in 7 minutes. He was joined 90 seconds later by a second deputy and a county fire investigator who had been on call for an unrelated structure fire. Trent was still on the lowboy when they arrived. The lighter was open in his hand. The flame was out. He was, in the recorded body camera footage that would be played at his arraignment, swaying slightly and looking very confused. He had not, the report later determined, been entirely sober. He was arrested on the spot for attempted arson, criminal mischief in the first degree, trespass, and conspiracy. The diesel jug bore his fingerprints. The wire cutter matched a model registered to Crawford Construction's tool inventory. His wife Allie was already under indictment. By morning, the federal U.S. Attorney's Office in Missoula had added a parallel charge of obstruction of justice on grounds that the attempted arson had occurred 2 days before a scheduled district court hearing on the writ of removal and was demonstrably intended to prevent the demolition of evidence of an active Clean Water Act investigation. By noon, the Crawford's criminal defense team had filed a motion to consolidate their state and federal cases. By 2 p.m., Trent's bond was set at $150,000, and his passport was surrendered. By 5 p.m., the Daily Interlake had posted the story under the headline, "Glacier Crest Developer Arrested Attempting to Destroy Aldridge Excavation Equipment." By 8 p.m., the story had been picked up by the Missoulian, the Billings Gazette, KECI, and the Associated Press. The cabin still sat on my pasture. The chimney was cold. The dock had a faint coating of frost. Sutton called me at 8:30. "Holt, the hearing on the writ of removal is Thursday morning at 10. Halsey Burke moved it forward 2 weeks, given the criminal escalation. Yarborough is filing one final motion to delay. He's claiming the criminal cases entitle the HOA to a stay of the civil ejectment. It will be denied. I've already drafted our opposition. How sure are you that she signs? Holt. The plat is void. The deed is yours. The construction was unpermitted. The septic is criminal. The rental was unlicensed. The boundary judgment is final. The husband of the HOA president just tried to burn your equipment to prevent the hearing. There is no legal mechanism in the state of Montana that would prevent her from signing the writ of removal Thursday morning. What time? She's calling the docket at 10. We'll have the order in your hand by 11. If you want to start the demolition Friday at sunrise, you can. I stood at the kitchen window. The cabin was dark across the pasture in the moonlight. I want to start Thursday afternoon, Sutton, the same day she signs. He paused. I'll let the news crews know. I hung up. I went out to the equipment shop. I started the excavator one more time and let it warm up for 20 minutes in the dark, watching my breath curl up into the rafters. The hydraulic lines had been replaced by Cole and Briggs that afternoon. The cab had been cleaned. Everything was tight. Judge Eleanor Halsey Burke signed the writ of removal at 10:37 on a Thursday morning in February in the district courtroom on First Street in Kalispell, with 17 people in the gallery. She read the order aloud from the bench. The Glacier Crest HOA was directed to immediately and permanently abandon the unauthorized structure on the Aldridge parcel, to cease and desist all rental and management operations, and to bear all costs of removal at the discretion and direction of the property owner, Holt Aldridge. Sutton walked the signed order out of the courtroom at 10:46. He met me on the courthouse steps in the cold sunshine. He handed me the order. I put it in my breast pocket. Tell the news crews, I said. Already done. I drove the 41 miles back to the ranch. By the time I reached the equipment yard, my crew was already loading. Briggs had the lowboys hooked. Cole had the dump truck staged. The bullhorn was clipped to the inside of my truck's passenger door. The orange tarp wall, 6 feet tall and 140 feet long, was rolled and waiting on the smaller of the two trailers. We rolled out of the equipment yard at 1:15. The cabin sat in the middle of the 4-acre parcel, where it had been built without permission 5.5 months earlier. The November snow had melted, refrozen, and melted again, and the gravel drive was a long, curving stripe across the matted brown pasture. The lodge's wood shingle roof shone faint in the afternoon light. The chimney was cold. 2 Flathead County deputies were already on site. The CBS, NBC, and ABC affiliates from Missoula and Spokane had cameras set up. The Daily Interlake had a photographer on a small ladder. Behind them, 20 Glacier Crest residents had gathered with their phones up. Allie Crawford was not among them. She was at the courthouse for an unrelated arraignment hearing on her own felony bribery charges. We pulled up. The crew unloaded. The orange tarp wall went up first, along the surveyed boundary line. We mounted it on portable scaffolding in 12 minutes. When it stood, the news cameras had a clean, wide shot of the cabin on one side of the orange line and the Glacier Crest greenbelt on the other. I walked over to the deputies. I shook hands with both of them. I handed Pruitt a folded copy of Judge Halsey Burke's order. He read it, nodded, and stepped back to the public right-of-way to keep the peace. I picked up the bullhorn. I walked to the orange tarp line. The cameras swung toward me. I pressed the button. My name is Holt Aldridge. I am a 4th-generation landowner on the southern slope of Big Mountain. The structure behind me was built without my consent, on land that has belonged to my family since 1968. I obtained today, from the Honorable Judge Eleanor Halsey Burke, a writ of removal authorizing me to remove that structure. I am a Class A demolition contractor licensed by the state of Montana. I will be removing it now, with the assistance of the men in my crew. The work will take approximately 3 hours. We will keep the debris on this side of the orange line. When we are finished, the parcel will be returned to the condition it was in before the structure was built. Thank you. I lowered the bullhorn. I climbed into the operator's cab of the John Deere 350G excavator. Cole climbed onto the smaller D6 Cat. Briggs climbed into the larger D6. The dump trucks pulled into staging position. I started the engine. We took the chimney first. The grapple closed around the top 6 feet of the stone stack and pulled. The chimney sheared at the second-floor mortar line and toppled backward onto the deck with a long, satisfying crash. The cameras were rolling. The crowd on the Glacier Crest side did not make a sound. Pete, who had insisted on coming and was sitting in my truck cab with his nose against the glass, watched without blinking. The roof came off in 3 pulls. The second-floor walls folded inward when Briggs's cat took the corner posts. The first floor went down in 11 minutes. The deck broke into long planks under Cole's bucket. The dock came out of the creek in 2 clean pieces. The gravel drive was scraped flat by the smaller cat in 26 passes. 2 hours and 48 minutes after the first cut on the chimney, the cabin no longer existed. The dump trucks rolled out the access road full of debris. The pasture was bare. The smell of fresh-cut timber and cold stone dust hung in the air long after the engines went quiet. Cole climbed out of the cat and stood a minute looking at the bare ground where the lodge had been. Briggs pulled off his hard hat and ran a glove across his forehead. None of us said anything. There was nothing left that needed saying. The orange tarp came down. The deputies tipped their hats and drove off. The news crews packed up. Hannah Ash of the Whitefish Pilot walked over to me at the property line as I was hosing diesel off the excavator's tracks. "Mr. Aldridge, anything you want to say to the families that booked future stays at the lodge?" I leaned on the excavator. I thought about it. Yes, any family that paid Glacier Crest to stay at the cabin between June and November is entitled to a refund. If Glacier Crest will not pay it, my attorney will ensure the Unjust Enrichment Award covers it. Folks who stayed at the lodge did not do anything wrong. They were guests. They will be made whole. She wrote that down. The cameras kept rolling. I climbed into my truck, opened the door for Pete, and drove home. Linnea was on the porch when I drove up. She had a mug of coffee in each hand. She handed me one without speaking. We stood at the rail a long time, looking at the empty pasture across the road, where the cabin had been. The afternoon light had gone the color of old brass. Somewhere in the lodgepole on the slope, a Steller's jay was scolding nothing in particular. "It looks the way it used to," Linnea said. "It will. Couple growing seasons and you won't be able to tell." In the weeks that followed, the rest of it moved fast. Trent Crawford accepted a federal plea agreement on the Obstruction and Clean Water Act charges in late March. He drew 63 months at the federal prison camp in Sheridan, Oregon, plus restitution totaling just over $400,000. The state attempted arson and criminal mischief charges ran concurrently. Allie Crawford went to trial on the bribery and conspiracy counts in May. The jury was out under 3 hours. She is currently serving 22 months at the Montana Women's Prison in Billings. The Glacier Crest HOA was placed in court-supervised receivership the following month and dissolved its existing board. The new board, led by a retired Forest Service ranger named Mary Pat Heffernan, voted unanimously to publicly apologize to the Aldridge family and to permanently amend the covenants to prohibit any HOA officer from authorizing improvements outside surveyed common area boundaries. Karis Vorland's surveying license was permanently revoked. She moved to Missoula and now works as a paralegal at a public interest legal aid office. She wrote me a handwritten letter in April, apologizing for what her signature in 2020 had set in motion. I accepted it and wished her well. The disgorgement order from Judge Halsey Burke totaled $304,000 in unjust enrichment, treble damages, and unpaid lodging tax penalties owed to me personally by the Glacier Crest HOA. The court attached the HOA's reserve account. The receiver liquidated several minor assets, and by August, the full amount had been collected. Sutton's fees came out of it. The rest came home, and I did not keep a dollar of it. I called my old friend Roy Heisen, who had been the welding instructor at Flathead Valley Community College, since I had taken his night class in 1986. I asked him what it would cost to start a free trade skills certification program for at-risk Montana high school graduates, kids out of group homes, kids out of foster, kids whose families could not afford community college tuition. Roy ran the math overnight and called me back. We could fund a paid summer cohort of 12 kids a year in heavy equipment operation, welding, diesel mechanics, and OSHA 30 safety for the next 8 years on what was left over. We named it the Aldridge Trades Academy. The first cohort started in June. 12 kids, 6 of them girls, 4 of them tribal scholarship recipients from the Confederated Salish and Kootenai. Every graduate leaves with a Class A operator's license, an entry-level welding certification, and a guaranteed paid apprenticeship at one of 7 Montana contractors signed onto the program. Cole runs the heavy equipment instruction. Linnea volunteers Saturdays at the safety classroom. June, who is now 5, has informed me that she will be enrolling herself in 2038 and that I am to keep her a seat. On the 3rd Saturday of the first cohort, Pete the healer walked himself to the academy and refused to leave. He now has a folding cot under the welding bench and a paper hard hat the kids made him from a busted Komatsu coffee mug. The 4-acre pasture where the cabin used to stand is back to grass. The native fescue came back on its own by July. The Whitefish Creek arm runs cold and clean past the bank where the dock used to be. The aspen on the north slope have started suckering into the open ground. The ground does not remember the cabin. The ground does not need to. The court file does, the news clips do, and the people who watched do. If your HOA is building on land that is not theirs, write it down. Photograph the structure. Pull the deed. Pull the plat. Find your Sutton. The petty tyrants of the world have always counted on the assumption that nobody owns enough equipment to do anything about them. They are wrong. Tell me your story in the comments below. Where are you watching from? And what did your HOA build on land that wasn't theirs? Subscribe so you don't miss what comes next. The next story I have for you involves a small-town diner, a stolen recipe, and a quiet old line cook in eastern Kentucky who waited 11 years to hand someone the menu they deserved. Pull up a chair.
What gets me about whole Audrey's story isn't the demolition, even though the demolition is the kind of thing you watch twice. What gets me is what Ellie Crawford counted on. She counted on him being gone. She counted on the deputy surveyor singing a death artist she never actually did. She counted on a quiet rancher who would come home, look at a luxury cabins on his land, and decide it was easier to take a check than to fight. She counted rounds on every count. Holmes did not raise his voice. He did not throw a punch. He went and got his biter. He called his attorney. He pulled the disc. He let his lawyer do the law work. And then he started his own bulldozer at sunrise the day the judge signs the order. If your HOA is building on land that's not theirs, write it down. Photograph the structure. Pull the disc. Find your Sutton. Drop a comment below if you ever stood across the line from a Karen with a contractor. Hit subscribe so you don't miss the next one. A small town dinner, a stolen receipt, an Eastern Kentucky line cook who waited 11 years for the right moment. I'll see you there.